Hi, everyone. It's great to see you, all of you out there. I'm going to start with my first slide. So as mentioned, this is me. My name is Laura Feinstein, and I'm Kickstarter's Senior Design and Tech Editor. And for about 15 years before I was at Kickstarter, I worked at the vanguard of media, really trying to find those stories of what's happening next in culture and design and tech and cities, and sort of where we're going towards next. So it has lended very naturally to my current work, where I help bring projects to life. So I'm sure that most of you have heard the name Kickstarter, but you might not necessarily know what it is. Kickstarter is the first and largest crowdfunding platform. Crowdfunding is a form of crowdsourcing and alternative funding. So when you have a project or idea and you want to bring it to life, you can appeal directly to your community as opposed to doing traditional means of VC funding, taking out a huge loan from a bank, or various other means of going into debt. So as of right now, I'm always hesitant to have this exact number because even by the time I finish talking, it could be different because every day we have new projects coming to life. So that means anything from fashion to plays to theater. And as of now, we've raised almost $7 billion for creators. And behind every single dollar is someone's dream that was brought to life through the Kickstarter platform. And as mentioned, we do all kinds of things, from music to technology, which is what I work on, crafts, comics. You might have heard of some of our most famous Kickstarters, Peloton, Allbirds. The TV show Fleabag originally started with a crowd-funded play at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So we're already out in culture, but you might not have necessarily known that we were exactly the ones driving it behind it. So right now, there are people from nearly every country, anywhere you can imagine, that have backed a Kickstarter. And when I have creators come to me and they say, where should I ship to? I say, factor in Antarctica, because you will potentially have someone from Antarctica that backs your project, truly from the top of the world to the bottom. But again, I am here specifically talking about design and tech on Kickstarter. These are just a few of the stats. We are the largest category on Kickstarter, and again, it can be everything from 3D printers to sneakers to fidget spinners. Those can fall within the design and tech sphere. We regularly have people come back to us every day to try to find out about new projects, to learn about new creators. It is a massive category that I am extremely proud to help work on. So how exactly does Kickstarter help creators? For example, if you are a creator and you don't necessarily want to go to your wholesaler and have something in bulk, if you don't know if there's even really a demand, you can do small runs. We have even large creators that come back to us once a year for our Make 100, which is where you only have to make 100 of something. And it's a great way to kind of test it out and see if there's real need, which also means funding product development. If you have really great dynamic prototypes, but you don't necessarily have the funding behind it yet to bring it to life. You've maybe applied for grants, you have done the traditional means, you can directly appeal to your community to help with the next stage of your funding. Okay, great. And you can do real-world R&D, which means when your campaign is live, you can even find out from your backers that maybe someone wants something in yellow. Maybe they were wondering if it comes in different sizing, things that you would never know if you had already created a full line and it was already out in the world. And you can also demonstrate market need, meaning that you could see if people actually want your project or your idea before you fully invest the years and hundreds of thousands of dollars it can take to create a company. You could say, is this something people want? Is it something people need? And coming as a former editor, what's invaluable is that you have this real estate on the web to tell your story in your own words. You get a full page where you can talk about why you're doing this project, why it's important to you, what it looks like, what it feels like, what you can offer. And we've helped bring some really incredible projects to life. For example, Mike Butera and Jacob Gordon were two musicians who wanted to create a new type of instrument that took professional sound quality and put it in the hands of all musicians. So they created Artiphone, where they were able to not only prototype and build their first instrument, they were actually able to build a full community around it, and they ended up becoming one of our biggest music projects of all time. They were adapted by other musicians, tinkering around. They were able to build their company. Similarly, the French artist Oscar Lemaitre, he wanted to create a highly specific topographical map of the moon that could also be used as a light. He didn't want to just 3D print it. He didn't want to just use a few maps. He wanted to actually work with NASA to create a 3D, fully functional in certain ways map of the moon. And in order to do that, he had to do a ton of prototyping, years of working with scientists, with creators. So he came to Kickstarter to create only 50 of these, but they're all rendered accurately, and he was able to sort of kickstart this project that normally would be incredibly pie in the sky, incredibly bespoke, not only sort of mass produce it in micro, but also actually see if people wanted it, to see if this was worth the effort. So he was successful. He was able to bring those 50 to life, and has gone on to do several other projects. And one of my favorite projects is the coconut cooler here. So that fits in a little bit more with what we've been discussing about innovative materials. So the coconut cooler is essentially the brainchild of 2 grad students who were at Stanford. And as part of their grad program, they had to find out how to make design that actually helped make the world a better place by being embedded with people in the world who needed design help. So as part of their research, they went to the Philippines to work with local fishermen to try to figure out how to make their lives easier. They spent years there, which is something that it is incredible to think about, but really studying where is there a need. They had noticed with many of these fishermen, by the time they brought their catch back to land, it had already gone bad. It was just very difficult to transport. There was a real need for a better type of cooler. So they tinkered around with many different use cases, many different models, different materials, and then they looked around and saw that the Philippines had a ton of coconut waste left over from the coconut industry, which is one of the largest industries there. And they started saying, is there some way we could bring these 2 things together, the need with the materials? They spent a lot of time tinkering, working with design, and they realized that coconut husks, at their essence, have the same type of insulation as styrofoam, but are lighter and, of course, biodegradable. As many, if not all of you know here, styrofoam can sit in our landfills for many years, if not till the end of time. But to actually have something like it that could be compostable or biodegradable would be revolutionary. So they set about testing it with these actual people in the world as part of their grad research program. And then they were eventually able to create what is now the coconut cooler that you see above. They were able to actually bring it to Kickstarter and say, is this something that other people would want? This is our grad project. We want to form a whole company out of it. What can we do with this? So they launched on Kickstarter. They were successful, and they now have $1 million company just from an idea that they had. But they were able to see that there was a real world need for it and to grow with it. Similarly, this is another one of my favorite projects. It's called Le Floor, and it is run by the two folks you see on your left. That is Natasha and Ellie, a father and daughter who had run a leather goods shop in Paris for many, many years. So essentially, Ellie had been a fashion insider. He'd worked with leathers. He had done the trade show route. And he had started noticing that he just wasn't seeing returns on his goods. He was putting a lot into trade shows. He was in danger of potentially having to find new routes for his store. So he appealed to his daughter, who, as a lovely and typical millennial, said, how can I take this onto the web? And so as an avowed vegetarian, she said, I will help with a family goods store if we go on the internet and you make it vegan. So he agreed because he knew about her drive and he knew that she could bring it to life. And he essentially gave her carte blanche And she got to work in her studios tinkering with different materials. After many years of trying to figure out how to transform leather into something else, she came upon a type of cork that was resistant to water, that was lightweight, but that had the durability of leather. And she was able to do it by finding different distributors and makers in Portugal who worked with the cork producers. So she created this very durable prototype of bags. And then came the difficult part. How are we going to tell people about it? So she started working on a Kickstarter, researching how you do that kind of work, how you do crowdfunding. And she ultimately came out with a really beautiful prototype, really bringing her father's dream to life. And in her first campaign, she made $1 million right out of the gate, which was incredible. Not only did it save the family business, it showed her that there was a real market need for these types of materials, and that also that she could have a self-sustaining company. They didn't need to sell the family business to a larger brand. They could stay independent. She could just spend her time in her lab making these beautiful items, working with materials, keeping it sustainable. She was able to learn more about the actual chain and visit the factories in Portugal, something that is really hard to do large scale, but through Kickstarter, she was able to stay independent. So I love bringing her up as just a showcase of that. If you want to go into fashion, if you want to do these innovative materials, you don't necessarily have to sit around and wait for the big brands to come knocking. You could stay independent, you could do these works, and you could, really play around with interesting materials. And to date, they have done, LaFleur has done 6 campaigns, raised over $5 million, and actually have another campaign coming up this fall. So they have built Kickstarter into their model. And I might sound like an evangelist for Kickstarter, and it's not just because I work there, but it's also because I've seen it really work for people to just get to play around with these materials if you, again, are not part of a university, you are not part of a larger company. So having worked at Kickstarter for 4 years, I've seen a lot of really interesting trends. And some of my favorites are these innovative materials. One of them is people using coffee grounds and repurposing them into really interesting things. So for example, turning them into sneakers, turning them into backpacks, turning them into hats. And this is a material that is readily accessible when coffee makers and distributors have this waste. It'll normally just end up in a landfill, but some of these places have actual agreements where you can get the waste and it gets turned into these amazing sneakers that have sold hundreds of thousands of dollars worth on Kickstarter. So again, there is that need. It was fascinating coming to Kickstarter from journalism and seeing that this is something that people were really responding to and could also find a home. Another material that's really interesting is cactus leather. There's a distributor based out of Mexico called Deserto, which some of you might have heard of, but they make this really durable type of leather made from excess cactus waste, in some cases agave waste. And our creators have been using it to make bags, to make shoes, to make these incredible materials. So if anyone here works with sort of those raw materials, hooking up with some of these creators who are turning them into finished products has been amazing to see and amazing for those of you to check out at home. Another example is the ways that our creators are using these materials to also reinvent the home and find new ways of making our homes more sustainable. One of which is the only orange peel lamp, which is the first lamp ever made from sustainable recycled oranges from Sicily. And so this lamp went through, again, many years of R&D and training, but today is compostable, which is incredible and wouldn't have existed before, and started out as a prototype before they came to Kickstarter. Once they launched, they received press in all the big design blogs, Design Boom, Dezeen, and were able to really launch this incredibly experimental project. But another thing that is very personally gratifying is seeing how people are also using Kickstarter and innovative materials to transform cities and the way that people work and bringing jobs. For example, Genesee, it was the project of someone who came out of FIT and said, I do not necessarily want to go the traditional route. I don't want to work for a big, wasteful fashion brand. What are the options? And so she went home to Michigan during this period to really think about what she wanted to do. And it just so happened to coincide with the Flint, Michigan water crisis. She looked around and saw all of these water bottles that were being tossed out, all of this waste, and said, there must be something more we could do about it. So she sat and she thought about ways that she could use the circular economy and materials to better help her town in many different ways. And she ended up creating a line of glasses called Geniusy that turned those bottles into something new. But just as importantly, it also gave a lot of jobs to people in the community. She was able to set up shop right out of college, start her own company. And she also made it a point to employ people who had been formerly incarcerated, who wouldn't have been able to find traditional employment, and bring them back to work. So she not only helped with waste, she helped revitalize this sector within her hometown. And similarly, many of you might have seen Gomi speakers. They're beautiful, they're stunning. You might have seen them in some of your favorite design shops, but they also started on Kickstarter. And they essentially are a group of designers based out of the UK who turned recycled e-waste from the Lime bike system back into these beautiful sound devices. So they have a sort of agreement with the local governments to do that collecting, and then it's reborn as this type of material. So they're a wonderful use case, again, of something that, you know, seems insurmountable, e-waste, old technology, old bikes, but they can be reborn as something new and beautiful. And so that brings me to my final slide. Every day we have new projects like these. If I had known I'd had more time, I would have given you like another 10 projects, but these are the ones that were some of my favorite. But this current project is one that is live right now. It was created by a group of teen students in Copenhagen, and it came out of seeing all of the wetsuits at their local clubs, at their local swimming holes that were going to waste. And they said, you know, there must be a better way. We want to be entrepreneurs. We want to help Denmark. We want to help Copenhagen. So they came up with a scheme to collect these wetsuits and to transform them into yoga mats. And this is currently live. So you can literally go on your phones now and back them if you wanted. But we do expect them to be successful. And they've also had a lot of help from local government. But more than anything, it's that they've shown a use case, and all of these creators have, that there are ways of turning all of this waste into something beautiful, into new projects. Whether you do it with Kickstarter or somewhere else, it doesn't always have to be quite so dire as it seems. And I hope you all will check us out. Thank you so much.